On today's show, the Buccaneers season hangs in the balance as the Bucs prepare to take on the Cards. Will Baker Mayfield be in the game, and what does it mean if he's not? Next on this edition of the Bucs Report, let's get Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the Bucs Report online. It's at BucsReport.com. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. So in this edition of the Bucs Report, the worst case scenario for the Buccaneers. And if you are a weekly listener of this show, first of all, thank you for listening and or watching this show. But if you are a listener or a viewer of this show on a regular basis, you know that I said it is the absolute worst case scenario for Baker Mayfield to be out due to injury. And well, here we are. That the Buccaneers have found a way to overcome missing some big wide receivers in Godwin and Evans and McMillan, even Abuka there for a bit, that they found a way to overcome. They found a way to overcome minus Tristan Wirfs for a bit and Bucky Irving. But Baker Mayfield, that is an obstacle too great for this team to hurdle. Is it possible that Teddy Bridgewater will get you a game here or there? Possibly. But I don't see the Buccaneers advancing into the playoffs if it's Teddy Bridgewater. And to be clear here, people are going to say, wow, Dan's blowing this out of proportion. The season hangs in the balance. That's all sorts of hyperbole. Listen, the Buccaneers have dropped three in a row here as they dropped to the Patriots, the Bills, and now the Rams here, that it's a difficult position. And as I take a look at the standings, yes, as a matter of fact, the Buccaneers are in first place in the NFC South. And thankfully, the Panthers got shellacked by the 49ers, but they're right there. The Buccaneers are 6-5. The Panthers are 6-6. And well, I don't really perceive the Falcons, the Saints, to be any real threat at the end of the day. But you take a look at it and how it seems as though the Buccaneers are kind of free falling, if you will, that we need some good news. And ultimately, the big question that I think a lot of us have is why was Baker Mayfield still in this game? That's my belief, and that how he left the game. And they asked Baker, "Are you good?" And Baker said, "Yeah, I'm good." I don't think they know what kind of cloth that Baker Mayfield is cut from. That I think that you would have to remove an arm, a hand, or a leg for him to say, "I don't think I can do this." That I think that to a certain extent, the Buccaneers need to save Baker from himself, because you take a look at the final 34-7. Baker Mayfield passing 9 for 19, 41 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Teddy Bridgewater had to come in out of the bullpen, 62 yards, 8 for 15. And I'm not trying to say that, Teddy's a poor quarterback. I know that's not the case. You even saw him warm up in the game. You saw him get better. And I think that the Buccaneers are in a better position now, even if Baker is not able to go in on Sunday versus the Cardinals. I think that Teddy Bridgewater gives them a better shot. But with that said, this is not optimal, that the Buccaneers are in the position that they're in large part let's not candy coat this or try to be a revisionist here. The Buccaneers are in the position that they're in, sitting atop of the NFC South because of Baker Mayfield. And what do I mean when I say that? All the obstacles, all the injuries that this team has had to face, and he is the piece that just lifted him up. He was the life preserver that was thrown out to the Buccaneers that, started the season really, really great. You took a look at the wide receiver room, the running backs, everything good. And then all of a sudden, the injuries just smacked the Buccaneers in the face. And many people, myself included, thought, well, is there any hope for this season? Well, as it turns out, yes, that the Buccaneers, were able to dig deep and are in the position that they're in. But talking about the last game in particular, there's a lot of things that are drawn into question. For one, I'm talking Baker Mayfield in a game that was so out of hand. That Hail Mary pass that wasn't where he got injured, but, that was when I could tell that he was just out of it. That had Jameis Winston vibes on it, where I don't see anybody open, but cross my fingers. Hopefully a Buccaneer can pull that one down. That you could tell that he was out of sorts. And for the Buccaneers coaching staff to just kind of let that guy stay in there, even though he was so injured. Looking at the score, and I know that wasn't the score at the time, but 34-7, what were you thinking? I would have rather lost the game than to be out, Baker Mayfield for some time here. And to be clear here, he's been banged up for a little bit here. And also big picture, 34-7 final. What in the hell was Matthew Stafford still doing in there? So some questionable judgment all around on this team. And the nature, we did find out what is wrong with Baker Mayfield. Bucs QB Baker Mayfield has an AC joint sprain in his left shoulder post MRI. It will be pain management issues, so it remains to be seen if he can play Sunday. But overall, not the worst news for sure. And they pointed to a time that he got injured when he was playing for the Browns. And he said, no, it's not the same situation. Like I said here, that it's ultimately about pain management. But this is definitely an obstacle that the Buccaneers are going to have to try to overcome. But, talking about that game, the game was already slipping away. You're down 24 on the road, 5 seconds left in the half, 4th and forever. And instead of protecting your franchise quarterback, you send Baker Mayfield out there to launch a Hail Mary, and boom, shoulder sprain, season now in limbo. And that was the early take. These are my notes from this week, that it does appear more hopeful now, but that was the real feeling. Walking out of that game against the Rams in first place, we knew that wasn't going to be easy, nor should it be. If the Buccaneers have grand plans of making it into the playoffs, and of course they do, and the Super Bowl, they're going to have to beat teams like the Rams. And look, I love Baker's toughness, but it's also detrimental at times. We all do. The man fights. He always has. He threw a touchdown while he was hurt. He tried to gut it out. The part is who he is, but this is where coaching has to protect the bigger picture. This is a moment where desperation beat discipline, and that is the difference between teams that survive late in November and teams that spiral. And this was a quote. I'm going to paraphrase it here, talking about Tom Brady, that Tom Brady understood that when he played for New England or when he played for the Buccaneers, that their greatest chance of winning games was with him in at QB. And that he said that he would rather lose a game or two than to miss the remainder of the season due to injury, doing something reckless. And, it's interesting that, it's so philosophical here already about Tom Brady, but that's why he was the GOAT. And that's why he played as long as he did. And I love the dog and Baker Mayfield, that he is willing to do whatever it takes to win a game. But that's also the biggest detrimental thing against him. And to be clear here, the Buccaneers would have lost a lot of games this season if it wasn't for the heroics or late game heroics by Baker Mayfield. And I respect the heck out of him for that. But like I said on this show, the rubber was going to meet the road at some point where he wasn't diving, when he was ready to get hit, when he was just taking that full impact. You knew that at some point he was going to get injured. And well, here we are. Like I said, I gave you the results of the MRI there. The timing cannot be worse. The Bucs are 6-5 now, and we're 5-1 not that long ago. And there was talk about Baker Mayfield MVP, and wow, what a Cinderella story around Tampa. Remember that? For fourth quarter comebacks, Baker Mayfield getting MVP buzz. That feels like a lifetime ago. And now the question is not just can Baker play? The question is, should he play? And there was an interview shortly before I hit the record button. I don't have the quote in front of me, but I watched the interview where he said that I understand that I'm better off. And this kind of ties directly to the Tom Brady quote that, if I'm not 100%, I would be better off sitting out a game for the greater good. Like I said, they still are in first place. But the worst thing that we want to have happen is a Baker Mayfield that's dinged up is to, exacerbate the issue and take this team back even more steps. That's what I do not want to have happen. There's still a lot of season left to play here, folks, relatively speaking, and the Bucs are in a good position. Let's not get crazy. But if you cannot, what does the offense look like with Teddy Bridgewater running it for a stretch? The team was already sliding. Now the quarterback health is uncertain, and one decision late in the half changed the entire tone of the season. So the biggest takeaway from this segment is not just the loss, the risk that might define everything that comes next. And again, that was a little bit more somber. That was a little bit more serious earlier in the week for the Bucs Minutecast, the other Bucs host that I show. But still, a lot of questions. And Baker, before this game was playing injured. And oftentimes he's the guy that shrugs it off. He is the ultimate competitor. So definitely a tough break for the Buccaneers. And ultimately how they will have to dig deep. All right, so coming up here in the next segment here, we'll talk about the loss exposed how fragile this team really is without Baker under center. What does it mean for this team if he's not good to go on Sunday? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report Podcast Network, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network, also featured on the Bucs Minutecast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. So talking Baker Mayfield in this show primarily because that's the big story, right? And there's talk, and I'll talk about it here in a bit, about Bucky, is trending towards playing and how big that'll be, but also to acknowledge that, his injury presented an opportunity for someone else. I'm talking about Tucker and more reps for Rachaad White. And ultimately, how's that going to shake out? What is the order? Of course, it's going to be Bucky 1. Is it Tucker number 2 or Rachaad number 2? But that's ultimately something for a little bit later in the show. But a tough break, for the Buccaneers for sure. Talking about how fragile this team is without Baker under center. And let's get into what actually happened on the field, because this one was ugly. Matthew Stafford carved this defense up. Davante Adams ran free, big plays everywhere. The Rams did whatever they wanted early and often. Stafford throws for 273 and 3 touchdowns, 2 of them to Adams before halftime. The Rams roll up over 330 yards, 20 first downs. Meanwhile, the Bucs offense never found a rhythm. Baker finished 9 of 19 for 41 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks, and one of was not totally his fault. Cade Otton bobbles it. Durant takes it back 50 yards for a pick 6. Game tilted immediately. And that this was a long shot, for the Bucs, and it would have definitely been a big victory, for morale, that we were able to take down the first place Rams, right? Not the case. But after that, nothing settled down. The defense could not stop the explosives. The offense could not answer. And once Baker left, the whole thing felt deflated. And the really, real feeling of this is what this team looks like without, I'm going to go ahead and say an all-star quarterback, right? One of the best in the league, in my estimation, and how this team could change in a hurry if it's Teddy Bridgewater football. Teddy Bridgewater did not even arrive in LA until Sunday morning because he was attending a funeral, thrown into the fire with almost no prep. That is not a fair situation for any quarterback, and Teddy handled it as well as he could. But you could feel the reality of how different this team is without its leader. Levante, the leader, the pillar on this team, said it best after the game. He called it embarrassing. He said, guys need to look in the mirror. Purpose was missing. This is not normal late season football for playoff teams. That is what desperate teams sound like. So big plays destroyed the defense. The offense never found momentum, and the emotional air left the building once Baker exited. That is why the loss feels heavier than just one number in the standings. It felt like a warning flare, and ultimately, why the Buccaneers are in the position that they're in. All right, so coming up here after the break here, we'll talk about the cruel irony is the Bucs are finally getting healthy everywhere except the one place they absolutely cannot afford it. Straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network and the Bucs Minicast Fans for Sports Network. So let's next talk about the irony. The Bucs are finally getting healthy everywhere except the one place they absolutely cannot afford it. Now, here is the wild part. Help is actually coming back. Chris Godwin returned. He was limited, only 2 catches, but he was on the field. Bucky Irving, who I'll talk about a little bit more in depth later in the show, is expected back this week. Jalen McMillan could return next month. Mike Evans is projected to be back before the regular season ends. Now, on paper, this offense is about to look whole again. And that is what makes this sting so much more, because if Baker is out, does any of it matter? And, the question is, if the Buccaneers lose another game, they got the Cardinals on deck here, and say the Panthers continue to go on a heater. I mean, what does that mean? Like I said, I don't think there's any real other threats in the NFC South. I don't perceive, of course, the Falcons or the Saints to pose any real threat, but the Panthers, surprise, surprise. Dave Canales' Panthers, who took that dumpster fire and turned it into a diamond ring. Okay, maybe a little bit far there, but was able to turn that team around in a quick hurry. But since arriving in Tampa, Baker has started every single game. 45 straight, tough as nails, leader of the locker room, the guy who stabilized this franchise. And now the Bucs might have to navigate the most critical part of the schedule without him. And make no mistake, the schedule matters. Cardinals at home, Saints at home, Falcons on Thursday night, then the Panthers twice, with Miami sitting in the middle. Those ultimately are winnable games. That is a division-shaping stretch, but they are only winnable with stability at quarterback, with timing, with chemistry, with leadership. And, they were saying that Teddy Bridgewater was taking a majority of the reps, of course, starting reps, because what was apparent was that he didn't know all the plays. He had to look at the old menu under the flipper on his wrist there, and surprise, surprise, a lot of run plays because, routes and all of that kind of thing that, as a matter of fact, if, Baker Mayfield is not able to go, the thing that has me feeling a little bit better is that I do think that the game on Sunday is winnable, minus Baker Mayfield. I mean, you take a look at the Cardinals, 3-8. If there was a game, to take a look at for Teddy Bridgewater to get the starts, that is it. And, you take a look at it, like I said, getting more reps in there, it puts the Buccaneers in a bit of a better position. But ultimately, I don't think that the Buccaneers are out of the woods yet. I think that there is still a lot for this team to do, and they very well might have to do it in the next game without Baker. Again, it's not as doom and gloom as we heard about, at least initially, after the injury. So I think as Buccaneers fans, we have to hope that Bucky is 100% ready, that Godwin, didn't exactly look like vintage Godwin, if you will, and that McMillan, is going to be back here sometime as well. Those are all the things we have to hang our hat on, that Baker is not as bad as first thought, and hopefully he can join this team sooner than later. All right, so coming up here, we'll talk about this is officially a must-win stretch, and Baker Mayfield is treating it like the playoffs. Straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. You can also find this show on the Bucs Minicast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. So, all right, Bucs family, this is the tone setter right here. Baker Mayfield just told you exactly how this team is wired right now. Every game is a must-win. Playoff mentality, no excuses. That how well can you play without me in there? I'm big brother, right? In that whole scenario that the Buccaneers didn't play as well with Tom Brady because they viewed him more as dad and Baker Mayfield as big brother. They're going to have to maybe do it without big brother. And I think, if he's on the sidelines, kind of, just that look like, come on, guys, do it for me, do it for this team, that, we're playing well, that we're still sitting atop the NFC South. Let's get it done. And even though the math might say otherwise, Baker is saying, forget the math. This is elimination football from here on out. And honestly, I love that mindset. One of the managers of the baseball team I cover, I like this attitude, is go 1-0 every game. Don't concentrate about who you're going to be playing 3-4 weeks from now or who you might play in the playoffs. Go 1-0 every game. He said flat out, if he can physically play Sunday, he will. That tells you everything about who your quarterback is. He's wired to compete. He is wired to fight. And he is wired to put this team on his back if his body lets him. But we need to save Baker from himself. If you're asking me right here, right now, we know that he's not 100%. And I don't think there's a minimal chance that he's going to be 100% by Sunday. I don't even want him really in there if he's like 80, 85%, that it is a horrendous Cardinals team. And if they lose this one, I don't love it. And I understand the must win and let's get her done. But I would rather have Teddy Bridgewater go into this game. And I think there's a real chance they win this game. Now, if this was against, the Rams, I would say maybe not necessarily the case. But even if it was, we need Baker as damn near 100% by the time the end of the season, the playoffs come as possible. Now, here is the key detail that matters. This shoulder injury is not like Cleveland in 2021. Back then, it was structural damage, torn stuff, serious stuff. This time, it is pain tolerance, not nearly as much damage. That is a massive difference because that means the question is not, can the shoulder hold up long term? The question is, can Baker manage the pain short term? And don't ask him if he's okay, because he will say, yes, we need the medical staff. We need doctors to sign off on it. And Baker even said himself, if sitting one game makes him healthier for a stretch run, he has to be smart. That is growth right there. That is leadership. Play every week like a playoff game, but also protecting the long game. That is a hard balance. That is a double-edged sword he talked about. And look at the schedule, 3 home games in 18 days. This is the season right now. This is Tampa Bay either resets the year or lets it slip. Todd Bowles even said it best. We control our own destiny. They have problems. They have the solutions. That sounds like a coach who knows the pressure is on, right? And yet another season that, here we go again, Todd Bowles is on the hot seat. Can you believe it? So when Baker says this is a playoff football right now, he's not talking hype. He is talking reality. This team does not have time to feel sorry for itself after the Rams loss. This is it. This is the push. This is the stand. All right, next we'll talk about Teddy Bridgewater is getting starter reps for real. And this quarterback decision is coming down to pain versus protection. Next. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network, also part on the Bucs Minicast on the Fans First Sports Network. So here is the thing getting interesting. Baker was at practice. That's encouraging, but it was just a walkthrough. Teddy Bridgewater, though, he was doing more, and more importantly, he is getting the most reps this week. I think that, for one, Baker doesn't need to get all the reps in. He's played all the damn games this season. So I don't know if I want to read totally into it, but I also understand that it kind of suggests that Teddy will be in there. That tells you everything about how serious this is. This is just not Baker will tough it out no matter what. This is Bucs actually preparing for both realities. Bull straight up said Teddy is getting the bulk of the work in case Baker cannot go Sunday. That is smart coaching. That is responsible football. And we all saw what happened against the Rams. Baker goes down at halftime. Teddy comes in, 8 of 15, 62 yards. That is not lighting the world on fire. That is not the recipe for the Buccaneers' success in, winning the Super Bowl at the end of the day. But it is also being dropped into a nightmare scenario on the road mid-game. Now, Teddy actually gets a full week of preparation, full install, full timing with receivers, and that matters a lot. So it's not going to be so reliant on the run game, the handoff, handoff, like just sit there and wait to hand it off and pop them. But let's not get it twisted here. The offense is built around Baker's edge, his energy, his ability to extend plays, his connection, with Godwin and Evans when he's healthy, and Ibuka, these kind of guys. Teddy is steady. Teddy is calm. Teddy will protect the ball, but he is not Baker. You could make the argument that back in the day, Teddy Bridgewater was a force to be reckoned with. I'm talking back in his Minnesota days. He's hop, skipped, and jumped most everywhere around the NFL. So the real debate for Tampa is this. Do you push Baker through pain right now because every game feels like the playoffs, or do you sacrifice one game to give yourself a better quarterback for December? For me, the answer is simple. Play long game, especially if it's one game. And that's kind of the feeling for me. It's against the Cardinals that suck. It's putting Teddy Bridgewater with all those reps in that I think there's a pretty good chance they can sneak this one out. And honestly, though, it's not an easy call because if you lose one more game, you start playing scoreboard watching. Ooh, what are the Panthers going to do? That kind of thing. If you rush Baker and he gets worse, you could lose him longer. That's the risk that I don't want. This is coaching. This is medical. This is leadership, all colliding in one decision. And that decision is coming fast. All right, next, let's pivot to help might finally be coming on both sides of the ball, and that changes everything for the Bucs down the stretch. Now, here's the part that quietly matters just as much. The Bucs are slowly getting healthier. And like I said, you saw Godwin. He was not 100%. Ibuka and Tez Johnson, those are kind of the guys, with K-Dot in there as well to get it done. But this team will be damn near as good as sketched out in the beginning of the season here sooner than later. Bucky Irving is expected back Sunday, and that is huge. If you want huge news, there's a couple things that Baker doesn't appear to be as injured as first thought, and Bucky should be good on Sunday. He has been out since late September with foot and shoulder injuries. And you add fresh legs to the offense, you add explosiveness back into the run game, you take pressure off the QB. This is not a small thing. This is a season-shifting thing if it hits right now. Chris Godwin looked fine at practice. That alone should make every Bucs fan breathe a little easier. And Jalen McMillan, the guy that got injured preseason Steelers, if memory serves, is trending in a good direction as well. His practice window has not officially opened yet, but the fact he is even out there moving is a good sign. Now, defensively, this might be even bigger. Hassan Reddick is back at practice. Think about that for a second. The Bucs signed him for pressure. They signed him for sacks. They signed him to wreck quarterbacks. He has 1.5 sacks. He has not played since October. I like the move, and he's been injured, but is he the right answer? And what has happened since then? The defense cannot get home. The pressure vanished. Yaya Diaby leads the team with 5 sacks. That is effort, that is hustle, but that is not enough by itself. If Reddick is truly back and close to full speed, that changes the identity of the defense. That changes how aggressive Bowles can be. That changes everything on third down. And when you put all of that together, quarterback decision, running back returning, receivers getting healthier, pass rush possibly returning, this is the moment where the season flips one way or the other. This is not about potential anymore. This is about execution. 3 home games in 18. You want to talk about destiny. It is sitting right there at Ray J. Baker is ready to fight. Teddy is ready to step in case. The roster is slowly getting whole again. Now the only question left is this: can the Bucs actually grab the opportunity that is sitting right in front of them? Because the door is open, the path is clear. Now all they have to do is walk through it. A lot of decisions for the Bucs. And the season can be summarized as the injured season and overcoming injury. And I think back to even the Jensen injury all those years ago and how that kind of changed the trajectory of that season for the Buccaneers. Much worse this season, a myriad of injuries. And the Buccaneers have found a way to overcome most all of them. What lies ahead here may be the most difficult part. All right, so coming up here next, we'll talk about the season is still live because Bucky Irving is coming back right when the Bucs need him the most. Straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, part of the Bucs Report podcast network, also simulcast on the Bucs Minicast on the Fans First Sports Network podcast feed. I'm going a little bit long today. It is a snow day for me where I live. I got a bunch of material that I put together here for you guys. Let's keep going. All right, listen, the season felt like it was slipping through our fingers, right? 3 straight losses, bruised ego, bruised quarterback, bruised everything, and then boom, here comes Bucky Irving walking back into the picture like, hey, remember me? Remember explosiveness? Remember hope? That is the biggest takeaway right now, that an offensive injection has been inserted back into the Buccaneers team. The team just got punched in the mouth by elite competition, Bills, Rams, ugly football, really ugly, 34-7 on national TV hurts different. And now you sit at 6-5, still somehow leading the NFC South, which feels insane when you think about it, how shaky things have been. But the offense without Bucky has been one-dimensional. That Rachaad White isn't as good as we thought. Sean Tucker, right now, he is RB number 2 if Bucky's back in there. And I don't think that should be too much of a stretch for you guys. Solid guys, no disrespect. They grind, they compete, but they do not tilt coverage. They do not strike fear. Bucky does that. Defenses have to account for him on every snap. Run, screen, check down, outside zone, inside zone. He changes the math on defensive coordinators. And now you get him back against Arizona at home. Perfect timing. Drew the cards at the exact moment you need to reset the season. You're not easing him into a meaningless game. This matters. The division is tight. Carolina is sniffing around. And, you take a look at the other teams in there. Again, I'm not viewing them as a threat. I just really not. Is it possible? Sure, anything's possible. I don't want to go about the woulda, shoulda, coulda. I'm not worried about any other team except for in the NFC South, except for Carolina. And it's not just about physical with Bucky. You can hear it in the reporting. Mentally, this was hard on him. First time away from the game like this, first major emotional grind. The staff protected him, and that matters. That is a franchise learning how to handle young stars the right way. If Bucky is healthy and focused, this offense looks completely different starting Sunday. And it is, as a matter of fact, trending in that direction. All right, to close out the show, we're talking about the NFC South is still there for the taking, but the margin for error is officially gone. If you have been with me the whole time, thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, but talking about the NFC South here. The Buccaneers 6-5 and the Panthers 6-6. Again, Falcons 4-7 and the Saints, not sorry, 2-9. How does that feel, Saints post Drew Brees? It has been a dumpster fire there Again, just a quick GM hat here for the Saints. Hire a freaking quarterback that's competent, right? But anyway, let's talk about the Buccaneers and the final segment of the show here. And here's the cold truth, Bucs fans. You are still in first place, and it feels like you should not be. And that tells you everything you need to know about the division, right? Carolina is closer than you want, and nobody is running away with it yet. And what do I mean? That, Carolina is playing much better than I thought this year, and I'm guessing you at home as well, which means the door is still wide open. But the next 3 games are everything. Cards at home, Saints at home, Falcons at home, 3 straight at Ray J. This is your runway. That is your playoff audition. And, you take a look at it, it's going to be a tough go of it. You split these games and you're sweating into January. You win all 3, and suddenly you're talking about another division banner going up. And that is what Bucky Irving is up to in all of this. Not Baker, not the defense alone. It is the balance that Bucky gives you. You stop becoming predictable. You start, your quarterback to be a superhero every snap. You start punting momentum away. One explosive run changes the game. One broken tackle swings the crowd. One screen pass taken 40 yards flips the emotional temperature of a stadium. The Bucs do not need perfection right now. They need identity, physical, balance, opportunistic. That identity has always been tied to the run game when this team is at its best. Bucky Irving gives you that identity back. So yeah, this season is fragile. It's still banged up. The margin is razor thin, but you are not dead, not even close. So that's what we're hoping for, Bucs fans. We're hoping that we can return back to the win column, because it has been a bit of a struggle here as of late. Again, you take a look at who's on deck here. I'm talking Cardinals, Saints, Falcons, the next 3 here. All winnable games. It could change everything. Conversely, if the Buccaneers lose, that could change everything as well. So we're hoping that the Bucs can dig deep, whether it's Teddy Bridgewater versus the Cardinals or not. This team should and could hopefully find a way to end up in the win column. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network, and I'll talk to you again next time.